It was a rainy morning in New York City, the busy streets reflecting the typical urban chaos with honking cars and pedestrians rushing to find shelter from the rain. In downtown Manhattan, the Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse, known for housing the most controversial and important cases in the U.S. legal system, was more bustling than usual. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Lawyers in expensive suits whispered and reviewed documents. At the center of the room, Judge Robert Sterling, a 60-year-old man known for his rigid demeanor and impatience with formalities, reviewed the day's cases. He had a striking presence, neatly combed gray hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and an expression that always seemed to be furrowed, betraying his natural skepticism. It was into this charged atmosphere that James Harrison entered. He couldn't have been more out of place among the others present. He was a thin, young black man, about 17 years old, wearing a simple dress shirt and a pair of worn-out shoes. He carried a black backpack that looked heavy, but he held it firmly. Despite his simple appearance, James kept his head high and his posture straight. All eyes immediately turned to him. Whispers began to circulate around the room. "Who's that kid? What's he doing here?" some of those present said. The contrast between him and the suited lawyers couldn't have been more striking. James walked to a bench at the back of the room and sat down, ignoring the curious glances. Shortly after, Judge Robert Sterling banged his gavel, calling the court to order. His voice echoed with authority in the room. "Let's begin the trial of the Miller versus Greenfield case, a land dispute in the upstate region. I call for the presence of the attorney representing the plaintiff." For a moment, there was silence. Then James Harrison stood up and, with measured steps, walked to the center of the room. With each step, the murmurs grew louder. When he reached the podium, he placed his backpack on the floor and said firmly, "Good morning, Your Honor. My name is James Harrison, and I am the attorney representing Ms. Sarah Miller." The room fell into complete silence. The lawyers exchanged looks of disbelief, and Judge Sterling himself stopped flipping through his papers to observe the boy. He adjusted his glasses and looked at James with a mixture of astonishment and disdain. "Excuse me, are you saying you are Ms. Sarah Miller's attorney? This is a real hearing, young man. We are not in a theater rehearsal. Where is the real attorney?" James remained calm, his voice controlled. "Your Honor, I am Ms. Miller's attorney. I am here to represent her, as per the law." Judge Sterling laughed, a short, dry laugh that quickly turned into sarcasm. "This must be a joke. Who gave this child permission to enter here as an attorney?" He looked around, seeking support in the equally perplexed expressions of those present. "Come on, kid. This is not a playground to play. Attorney." At that moment, a voice sounded from the back of the room. It was Ms. Sarah Miller, an elderly woman of humble appearance. She stood up and said firmly, "He is my attorney, Your Honor. He was the one who agreed to defend me when no one else would." Judge Sterling narrowed his eyes, clearly annoyed. He banged his gavel to silence the murmurs and asked James Harrison to present his credentials. The young man opened his backpack, took out a sealed envelope, and handed it to the court. "Officer." When the officer passed the documents to the judge, the atmosphere became silent again, with everyone watching intently as the judge examined the papers. His expression gradually changed from disbelief to surprise. He looked at James and, for the first time, spoke without sarcasm. "Well, it seems your documents are in order. You are indeed a licensed attorney. But tell me, young man, how did someone your age achieve this?" James faced the judge with serenity and replied, "With a lot of study, Your Honor. But I am not here to talk about myself. I am here to defend my client." The judge was momentarily speechless, but soon regained his composure and announced, "Very well, since you insist, you may present your case. But I warn you now, do not expect any condescension from my part." James nodded, returned to the podium, and began to organize his papers. The room was still immersed in murmurs, but he, oblivious to everything, knew that he needed to prove not only to the judge, but to everyone there that he was up to the challenge. James Harrison was born and raised in the Bronx, one of New York City's largest boroughs. He was the only child of Ms. Vera, a hard-working woman who raised him alone since his father abandoned them when he was a baby. Ms. Vera worked as a domestic cleaner, cleaning houses in wealthy neighborhoods of the city, and often left before dawn and only returned late at night, exhausted but determined to give her son a better future. From an early age, James showed himself to be different. While other children played in the streets, he preferred to spend hours reading the few books his mother brought home, often found in the trash or given by people she worked for. When he began attending the neighborhood public school, he quickly caught the attention of teachers for his intelligence and curiosity. He not only learned quickly, but had a thirst for knowledge that impressed everyone. Around the age of 9, James began to show an exceptional talent for solving mathematical problems and a unique ability with words. One of his teachers, Mr. Arnaldo, noticed the boy's potential and began to help him, bringing him more advanced books and materials to study. "James, you have something special, kid. Never let anyone convince you otherwise," the teacher used to say. At 12, James participated in a regional writing competition and won first place, beating students from renowned private schools. His essay, titled "The Right to Dream," spoke about the reality of communities and the importance of fighting for justice. The essay attracted so much attention that a local journalist wrote an article about him, which ended up changing his life. Because of this visibility, James secured a full scholarship to an elite high school in New York City. But this achievement came with challenges. In the new environment, he was constantly subjected to prejudice. Many classmates from wealthy families mocked his humble origins and the fact that he was the only black student in the class. "What are you doing here?" he once heard from a colleague. "This place isn't for people like you." James, however, never allowed these words to shake him. He knew he was there by merit, and that his presence was only uncomfortable because it challenged stereotypes. "It doesn't matter what they think," his mother would say when she saw him downcast on some nights. "You are my pride, my genius, and you will go much further than they imagine." During his years in high school, James excelled in all subjects, but he had a special passion for debates. He became president of the debate club and began participating in state competitions, always advocating for topics related to equity and social justice. It was at this time that he decided he wanted to be a lawyer. "I want to help people like us, Mom. I want to fight for the people nobody listens to," he said one night while studying. At 15, James managed to enter a special advanced studies program that allowed him to complete high school and begin law school at an accelerated pace. He attended public university during the day and studied late into the night at home, always determined to achieve his goal. When he graduated at just 17 years old, he received special recognition from the university for his brilliant academic performance. But even after graduating, the challenges continued. Finding opportunities in the legal market, being young, black, and from a humble background, was not easy. He spent months submitting resumes and facing disdainful looks. But James did not give up. He knew that his greatest weapon was his knowledge and his determination. That's why, when Ms. Sarah Miller, a longtime neighbor of his mother's, sought legal help, James did not hesitate to take the case, even knowing it would be difficult. Ms. Miller was facing a dispute against a large company that claimed to have rights over the land where she and her family had lived for decades. Without money to hire renowned lawyers, she trusted James, the boy who had grown up next to her and who was now a trained lawyer. "Do you believe you can help me, James?" Ms. Miller asked with tears in her eyes. "I don't just believe, Ms. Miller. I know I can," he replied, determined. Thus, James Harrison decided that this would be the first of many battles. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but as in all his life, he was willing to fight against adversity. It was the day of the hearing. The Thurgood Marshall United. State's Courthouse in New York was bustling. Experienced lawyers paraded with their leather briefcases, clients waited anxiously, and the air was charged with formality. Amidst this crowd, James Harrison entered the courtroom alongside Ms. Sarah Miller. He was wearing the best he had, a simple blue dress shirt, black pants, and a pair of shoes that his mother had specially refurbished for the occasion. As soon as James walked across the room, eyes turned to him. First curiosity, then disbelief. After all, who was that young black man, so simply dressed, to be in such an imposing environment? Ms. Miller walked beside him, her hands trembling, but James's confident expression comforted her. Judge Robert Sterling, already seated in his position of authority, observed their movements. His gaze was known for its strictness, and he tolerated nothing that deviated from strict court formalities. When James was ready, the judge banged his gavel, calling the court to order. Case Miller versus Greenfield. I ask the legal representatives to present themselves, he announced in a severe tone. A brief silence fell over the room, and then James Harrison stood up. With firm steps, he walked to the podium. The sound of his footsteps seemed to echo amidst the murmurs that arose as soon as he began to speak. Your Honor, my name is James Harrison, and I am the attorney representing Ms. Sarah Miller, he said with a clear and firm voice. The room was taken by a momentary silence, followed by muffled laughter and looks of surprise. The lawyers present whispered among themselves, some clearly amused by what they believed to be a joke. Judge Sterling adjusted his glasses and narrowed his eyes, as if wanting to confirm what he had heard. He clasped his hands and leaned slightly forward. Excuse me, young man, are you saying you are Ms. Sarah Miller's attorney? He asked with a tone loaded with sarcasm. Yes, sir, James replied without hesitation. Judge Sterling let out a dry laugh and looked around the room as if seeking complicity from others. This must be a joke. How can a boy your age be here impersonating an attorney? Where is the real attorney? Ms. Miller, sitting in the back, stood up with a mixture of fear and determination. He is my attorney, Your Honor. He was the only one who agreed to help me when no one else would. The judge raised his eyebrows, clearly intrigued but also irritated. Well, if that's the case, young man, I hope you have proof of your qualification. We are not here to play attorneys. James calmly opened his backpack, took out a sealed envelope, and handed it to the court officer. Silence fell over the room as the officer carried the documents to the judge. During this moment, James maintained an erect posture, facing the judge with serenity. When Judge Sterling opened the envelope and began to review the documents, his expression gradually changed. He went from skeptical to serious, and finally to surprised. The room seemed to hold its breath as it awaited the final confirmation. Well, from what I see here, you truly are a licensed attorney. You are registered with the Bar Association, and everything seems to be in order, the judge said, adjusting his glasses again. He paused and looked at James. But tell me, how did someone your age achieve this? This is not common at all. James did not let himself be intimidated. He took a deep breath and replied, Your Honor, my mother always taught me that with effort and dedication, anything is possible. I studied hard, passed the exams, and fulfilled all the requirements. I am here today to ensure that justice is served. Judge Sterling frowned, clearly challenged by the young man's confidence. Very well. If you are so confident, you may proceed, but know that I expect nothing but professionalism here. I will not make concessions due to your age or anything else. James nodded calmly, returned to the podium, and began to organize his papers. Eyes were still on him, some with disdain, others with surprise. Even under all this pressure, he maintained his composure. He knew that the biggest test was yet to come. Ms. Miller watched him from the back bench, her hands still trembling, but with a new hope shining in her eyes. She knew James was young, but she also knew he was her best chance against the powerful Greenfield Corporation. With Judge Robert Sterling's permission, James Harrison adjusted his papers at the podium, maintaining a firm posture. His room was still filled with murmurs, but he seemed immune to any distraction. The case he was defending was delicate. Ms. Sarah Miller, a humble elderly woman, was facing a dispute with Greenfield Corporation, a powerful agricultural company that claimed to own the land where she and her family had lived for over 30 years. James began his presentation with a clear and objective voice. Your Honor, today I represent a citizen who dedicated her entire life to work and family. The land in question has belonged to Ms. Sarah Miller since it was acquired by her late husband, but now it is being unjustly claimed by a company that uses its influence and power to try and take it from her. He held up a document he had previously set aside. Here is the original property record that shows Ms. Sarah Miller and her family have held the deed to the land since 1992. James began to distribute copies of the document, calmly explaining every technical detail. He cited articles of the U.S. Civil Code related to property rights and presented evidence that Greenfield Corporation was attempting to manipulate documents to invalidate the elderly woman's legitimate possession. As he spoke, his argumentation was clear and precise. He did not use elaborate or complicated words, but he managed to be technical enough to impress even those who had initially scoffed at him and who now began to pay attention. Furthermore, Your Honor, he continued, holding up another paper, here is an independent expert report that confirms the documents presented by Greenfield Corporation contain irregularities. There are clear indications of alteration in the signature of the supposed original seller. This evidence confirms that the company's intention was to defraud my client's right of possession. Judge Sterling, who at first barely concealed his disdain, began to lean back in his chair, analyzing the documents with more attention. He gestured to Greenfield's attorney, who immediately stood up. With all due respect, Your Honor, began the company's attorney, Mark Davis, a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit and a condescending smile. This case is more complex than Mr. Harrison tries to make it seem. Greenfield Corporation acquired the land legitimately, and all documentation is regularized. Furthermore, I must say that the defense presented by him lacks experience. He cast another condescending glance at James, trying to destabilize him. With all respect, Your Honor, we must ask ourselves if Mr. Harrison truly understands the complexity of this case, or if we are facing a well-rehearsed but empty speech. The tension in the room was palpable. Judge Sterling looked at James and gestured for him to respond. James took a deep breath, controlling the emotions rising within him. He knew that Mark Davis was not just questioning his evidence, he was questioning his legitimacy, something James had faced throughout his life. Your Honor, James began, his voice calm but filled. With conviction, my job here is to present facts, and the facts clearly show that the documents presented by Greenfield Corporation contain serious irregularities. This is not a rehearsed speech, as the defense suggested, but concrete evidence that has been verified by specialists. He held up one of the documents and walked towards the projection screen in the courtroom. Allow me to highlight once again the inconsistencies in the signature of the supposed seller here. He pointed to the signature. We see a blatant difference between this signature and other authenticated signatures of the same individual. This is more than an irregularity. It is evidence of bad faith. Silence filled the room as James explained every detail, using technical language sufficient to impress the court, but clear enough for everyone to understand. He cited specific articles of the U.S. Civil Code, reinforcing that document manipulation constituted an attempt at fraud. More than that, Your Honor. James continued, now turning to the judge. This case is not just about documents or property, it is about a basic principle of justice. My client, Ms. Sarah Miller, dedicated her life to this land. She raised her children here, planted trees, cared for the land. It is not just a piece of ground to her, it is her family's history. James paused, letting his words resonate in the room before concluding. "Your Honor, what is on trial here is more than property. It is the dignity of an American citizen who trusted the legal system to protect her." Judge Sterling rested his chin on one hand, thoughtful. He seemed to evaluate not only James's words, but also the impact they had on the case. When Mark Davis tried to speak again, the judge raised his hand, indicating that he should wait. "Mr. Davis, I will take some time to review the evidence presented by both parties before making my decision. This court will recess for 1 hour." As soon as the judge left the room, the murmurs returned. Many of those present began to discuss the strength of James's arguments. Some older lawyers, who had initially laughed at him, now looked at the young man with respect. Ms. Miller approached James and held his hand. "Thank you, my son. No matter what happens, you have already done more for me than I could have imagined." James smiled, squeezing her hand. "Ms. Miller, we are not finished yet. We will go all the way." After the break, the court resumed. Judge Sterling entered with a serious expression and sat down. He banged his gavel, calling for silence. After carefully analyzing the evidence presented and hearing the arguments from both parties, this court has reached a decision. The authenticity of the documents presented by Greenfield Corporation has been seriously questioned, while the evidence brought by the plaintiff was consistent and well-founded. Therefore, I rule in favor of Ms. Sarah Miller. The property remains in her name. The room erupted in murmurs and exclamations of surprise. Ms. Miller began to cry with joy and hugged James tightly. The judge then looked directly at James and for the first time spoke in a softer tone. "Mr. Harrison, I must admit that at first I had serious doubts about your ability, but today you proved that talent and dedication can overcome any prejudice. This court thanks you for reminding us of the true purpose of justice." James nodded, visibly moved but maintaining his composure. He knew that this moment was more than a judicial victory. It was a milestone in his fight against the prejudices he had faced all his life. Judge Robert Sterling's verdict echoed in the minds of everyone present in the courtroom. The young attorney, James Harrison, had not only won the case, but had also changed the perception of those who initially doubted him. James Harrison's name was already being whispered in the corridors of the Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse, not just as a talented attorney, but as a symbol of determination and overcoming. Ms. Sarah Miller, still emotional, wiped away tears as she thanked the young man. "You didn't just save my house, James. You saved my history, my family's legacy. May God bless you, my son." James smiled, his eyes misty, but maintained his professional demeanor. "Ms. Miller, your fight is the fight of many people. I just did what was right, and I want to continue doing that for everyone who needs it." As he gathered his papers, several lawyers who had previously ignored him began to approach, congratulating him. Even Davis, the experienced attorney for Greenfield Corporation, came up to James with a more humble expression. "I have to admit, Harrison, I underestimated you. Today I learned a lesson I will never forget," Davis said, extending his hand. James shook his hand and replied humbly, "We are all here to learn, Mr. Davis. Thank you for the opportunity to defend my client." In the days that followed, James Harrison's story began to circulate in local newspapers and on social media. Articles highlighted the young attorney from the inner city who faced giants in the courtroom. The story quickly gained traction, inspiring young people across the United States who saw themselves reflected in James. Messages began to reach him through social media. One of them, from a young woman named Luna, caught his attention. "James, my family lives in a difficult situation, and sometimes I feel like my dreams of studying and changing our reality are impossible. But after hearing your story, I realized that we can't give up. Thank you for being an inspiration." James responded to each message, encouraging young people to persist in their dreams and believe that education is the key to transforming realities. With the repercussion of the case, James decided to go a step further. He created a project called Justice for All, which offered free legal assistance to low-income individuals and mentorships for young people interested in the legal field. In partnership with volunteer lawyers and universities, the project began organizing workshops in underserved communities, showing young people that knowledge could be a powerful weapon against injustices. During the project's first event, James spoke to a group of young people and adults. "I too have been underestimated. I've been told that my place wasn't here, but I proved that our place is where we fight for it. I want you to know that you are capable, that you have value, and that you can change your stories." Months after the case, James received an unexpected call. Judge Robert Sterling invited him to an event at the Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse. Upon arriving, James was surprised by a ceremony in his honor. The judge, with a less severe demeanor, spoke before an audience of lawyers, judges, and students. "When I met Mr. Harrison, I admit I was skeptical, but today I can proudly say that he taught me something fundamental. Justice is not measured by age, by color, or by the origin of those who defend it. This young man is an example of what we should all strive for in our profession." The judge handed James a plaque of recognition with the inscription, "For your dedication to justice and for the inspiration you brought to many." Despite the recognition, James never forgot who always believed in him: his mother. On a quiet afternoon, he returned home with a bouquet of flowers and the plaque of recognition in his hands. Miss Vera, who was waiting for him with a proud smile, hugged him with tears in her eyes. "This is for you, Mom," James said, handing her the plaque. "None of this would be possible without you." Ms. Vera replied, "I always knew you were special, my son, but the most beautiful thing of all is the heart you have. It's not just about what you do, but why you do it." As the years passed, James Harrison continued his brilliant career as a lawyer and mentor. His story was not just about winning a case, but about breaking barriers, inspiring change, and showing that talent and determination have no color, age, or origin. In an interview for a TV program, James summarized his journey with words that resonated across the country. "Justice, for me, is not just a profession. It's a mission, and each of us has the power to make a difference, however small it may seem. My story is just the beginning. I hope it inspires many others to keep fighting, no matter the obstacles."